Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we are going to talk about a kickoff meeting, why we have a kickoff meeting, what should be included, how to build out a template, and we'll actually take a look at one. So going back to the services life cycle, the assumption is that we have identified a need, we have come up with the plan and the solution, the client has agreed, yes, we want to do this with you, and here's what happens, the nasty handoff between the sales team and the people who have to actually execute and deliver the project. And so the best way to do this handoff is to do a kickoff meeting. And we're assuming that the statement of work is signed. And if you watched the previous video on what's included in a statement of work, you'll see how that plays in significantly to preparing for this kickoff meeting. So as an organization, I highly recommend that you just go ahead and put together a standard template that would just be called kickoff deck. You can put in there who prepared it and when. And we always start off a kickoff meeting by first, before you even do this, you need to send a meeting invite. So I have some standard copy, happy to share it with you, of the invitation. So who needs to be in the kickoff, what the expectation is, why they're being asked to attend. And then I go ahead and get that on the calendar first and foremost. That gives me a couple of days, usually a week or two, to actually put together the kickoff meeting deck. And I always start from a template. So let's start and see what is included in a kickoff meeting. When we are doing a kickoff, chances are it is the first time that we have met or worked together. There are a lot of scenarios where that's not the case. Even with clients that I've been doing repeat work over and over again, I still do a kickoff meeting. The first two slides are way more important if you don't know each other, if it's the first time you're engaging, but you really want to say, what's the introductions, who's playing what role on the project, and put in here how everyone can get in contact. This is going to set the stage for good communications. And it's not just you as the service provider, but also you want to know on their side who's engaged in the project, what the expectations, what the roles are, and what their email or contact information is as well. Just gathering all this information up front, especially if they're a new client, can take a little while. So you want to make sure that you're preparing your client ahead of time to say you need to know who's going to be on the project, what their roles are going to be. They might need a little help understanding who needs to be on the project. If we go back and we take a look at that work breakdown structure, I actually build into some of my project plans where the clients need to be engaged and what the expectations are for them. So I may not put in here we go. I may not actually put in hours, but I'll say this person has to do, the client has to do the data import right here. And sorry, that should not have been read. Wanted that highlighted, but point being, the client is responsible for doing the data import. And so I've called out in the project plan that that's what they need to do. So when we look at our work breakdown structure, we should very clearly be able to see, okay, who all needs to be engaged and who needs to be involved. This is a great time too to talk about who are the stakeholders who are not involved in the project but will be impacted, and we'll talk about why that's important and some of the change management components that you should be thinking about really early in the project so that you can help your clients prepare as you deliver the services. That being said, beginning phase, always introductions. If you don't know each other, great time to do a icebreaker. I love the go around the room and tell one thing that nobody knows about you. It helps build camaraderie and relationship, and that's super important at the beginning of a project. After that, you want to make sure that everybody knows why they're here. And the purpose of doing a kickoff meeting is always to make sure that people understand the expected business value, the expected ROI, the expected impact for doing the project. That is first and foremost. And then we want them to understand the scope of the project. So what will you do as a service provider? What won't you do as a service provider? And that you're going to have to manage that because scope creep happens all the time. So helping everybody get on the same page about what the scope is up front is a good idea. This is also incredibly important because you're getting clarity at this point. If there's anybody who thinks, no, it should be something more, it allows you to go back and say, hey, we need to take a look at this statement of work before we get too far down the line. And I actually go back to my kickoff at the end of a project and say, at the beginning, we said we were going to do item 1, 2, and 3. We actually did item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or, during the project, we didn't do item 2 because there was a change request. So just documenting this up front in some place other than the statement of work for the project team is really important. And it's because the people that see the statement of work typically have a purview into the financials. And sometimes we don't want everybody on the project to know that. So it's great to have it in another place as well. We also want to make sure that everybody knows what will be needed from them and that we all have a common understanding of definition of success. So we'll talk about scope, the business case, the schedule, the risk. Depending on your audience, sometimes I talk about budgets. If it's a pretty open book management kind of organization, it's fair to say this is what we have budgeted for the project. We're going to report against what we're spending. Some organizations don't like that, so that's something you just need to figure out with your project sponsor prior to getting started. And then I always identify this is what I need from you from a next steps perspective, and I ask them if they have any questions. And I want to make sure that if they have any recommendations, they know their organization better than I do. Now is the time to get those because it might just be some of the things that will save your project in the long run. So that being said, hop into it and we talk about the project. So what are the deliverables? When you're in some sort of a project, it's fair to tell people, okay, we understand that we have developed a solution and we're in this phase, that there may be tweaks along the way as we gather more details. And in that event, there may be change requests that come along, but we want to do an excellent job because at the end, we're going to ask you for referrals. So if there's anything throughout this project that we aren't doing to your expectation, please let us know sooner rather than later so that we can ask you for referrals and for positive feedback later on in the process. Within this particular project, I did need to talk a little bit about organizational maturity. And so this is talking about the business value. So for this particular project, we were talking about the objective and the goal was to move them from their current state, which was this minimal operating project, up until the defined. And so this gave us some understanding and some conversation about where they currently stood and where they wanted to go. And then we talked through some of their different processes, and all of these were the things that were in scope for their project. So we were going to talk about the sales process and the operations process and the customer retention process. Notice that we did not talk about the HR process and all the other things. So it's great to add a slide that says out of scope as well if there's other things you talked about but decided that you're not going to do. And then this is the business value conversation. So why are we doing this project? And then have conversations about, will you use this? Where do you see there being areas that you might fall down or that this might not be of value? And build the business case, really help them understand why you're doing it, the big picture, the overall why, so that the people who have to do the day-to-day really understand they have a bigger impact. Once everybody really understands the why, what we're delivering, what's included, then we can start talking about the schedule. Again, because you have already done your estimating template, you have turned that into this schedule here where you've broken it down and you've determined what are the tasks, who's doing those tasks and across what days, and then you've added those to your resourcing spreadsheet. You can go in and you can give them a pretty clear understanding of, by week 3 here, we should be done with some of the discovery. By week 4, we're moving into the build and deploy stage. We anticipate the project finishing up here around week 4 or week 5. So all of the work that you have done not only helps you from a resource planning, but also so now you can set expectations with your client in terms of schedule. It's really important too, when you're setting those expectations, that you call out what is expected of them. So I let them know we're going to have these information gathering meetings. During this phase, I'm only going to need you a few hours. Just really help them understand what's going to be expected. And again, because you already have your work breakdown structure, it should be pretty easy to share with them. I always use the project kickoff meeting to ask the team what the risks are. So this is a great opportunity to actually pull up the risk report that you put together. You created this in a vacuum, most likely. And so this is an opportunity to run through with the team and say, I've already identified that there's probably going to be resource dependencies or resource risk. What other risk am I not aware of that I should be aware of? And let's all get on the same page about who's going to manage those. Where are we going to store information? How are we going to handle these risks? And there's another video on monitoring the project, status reporting, risk and issue tracking. So I invite you to watch that about how that could work for you. But in the kickoff, you want to facilitate a conversation with the project team because they're going to come up with some things that you probably didn't come up with. And then just getting clarity that we're all on the same page. Do we agree? A lot of times it is you as the service provider meeting with a business owner or a project lead, and the project team doesn't necessarily all understand or know all the details that went into coming up with this idea and this plan and this estimate. So including them and their voice, again, will create that collaboration, that buy-in that will make your project more successful in the long run. And then I always ask them if they have any questions. I identify here are the next steps. So exactly what I need them to do. We've already established scheduling. So a lot of what needs to be done here is scheduling meetings. You have a pretty good plan, so you can schedule meetings out pretty far in advance. I will recommend that you go ahead and put the meetings on the calendar as soon as possible because everybody's okay with taking a meeting off the calendar. You can't wait until the day of or the week of a meeting that you need to have and add it on to as many people's calendars. So schedule out, use your project plan, schedule out as many meetings as early as you can. Those need to include those governance meetings. So how often are we going to meet to monitor this project? Who's going to be involved in those? Are you going to do a daily stand-up? Is it going to be once a week, a status meeting? All of that gets established in the kickoff, and then that identifies or tells you what meetings need to be scheduled. Go ahead and schedule them immediately after the kickoff meeting. And then you ask them for any recommendations. So is there anything that they know about the organization that you need to be aware of that we haven't already covered? Any recommendations on how to communicate with people? Again, it's just another opportunity for their voice to be heard. I take this kickoff deck and I save it on a shared site so anybody can go back to it. Nobody can say that they weren't informed. They didn't know why we were doing the project. They didn't know what to expect. And then, like I said, I actually use this at the very end to do a lessons learned, and I'll do a separate video on that for you as well. So as always, hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions or you need anything, here's my contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.